Hi, I'm Simon Hartley.
And I'm Helen Martin.
Welcome back to Pep Talks. We are joined again today by Sarah Frasca. Sarah, I really enjoyed our conversation last time about innovating and being creative. I've seen a lot of people looking for innovative solutions recently. What have you seen? What have you seen people doing and the kinds of things they've been innovating with?
Yeah, thank you again, both Helen and Simon, for having me back. It's an honor. I have found that our humanity is starting to really kick into overdrive, and I've really been encouraged, both personally and professionally, with the things that I'm seeing across the world. I think this has, the type of environment we're in right now has the natural inclination to connect us, which is really positive. I think, obviously, the way that we're working is being flipped upside down from what we've known to date. And it's funny, even the most conservative environments that believed that security or the connection between people in a physical location, that they could never change that. I think we're seeing, there's no choice. We have to innovate. We have to do things differently. So sometimes our hands are forced. Sometimes we proactively can find some ways to make this work. But anyway, I would say, again, I think the future is very bright. I think people are understanding that, the amount of creativity in the world is unbelievable. And I truly believe that when our backs are against the wall, when we don't feel like we have a choice, that is when we find this human spirit that brings that type of problem solving, that really starts to think outside the box, because that's our nature. And it's so encouraging. It's so fun to see. It's happening in all sorts of industries across all different facets of the world.
And I think normally, Sarah, game-changing breakthroughs are glamorous and they're usually quite big, but actually small acts of everyday innovation are the stuff of greatness. And I think that's what we're finding. People are adapting and kind of thinking of a different way of doing things. But just to touch on that, and I know you'll have some great examples first, I think a lot of people are struggling with how to encourage and support their team from a distance, even though they're getting used to this virtual world. What do you recommend for that?
Yeah, again, I think it's interesting how it starts with our humanity, right? I mean, none of us knew how to do this. None of us have the answers. And if we pretend that we've got all of them, I think, that puts our teams at a disservice, because I think the people who have done it the best are the ones that have said, we're going to pivot, we're going to test and learn, we're going to see how this goes. And it's more about the intention and the attitude than it is the actual results at this point. And that's just kind of this linking of arms to say, we're all just humans. We're all going through the same thing. Let's try some things. If it doesn't work, we will navigate a new way. And those are that honestly is the foundation of innovation. When teams can figure out how to support each other in the environment of failure. And I use failure often as the term. It's little ways of testing and learning, of prototyping, of trial and error. And we get so bogged down with this concept of, oh gosh, I've let my team down, or oh gosh, I can't do that because I don't want to look silly or to fail. And rather, I think this time is teaching us that if we can become comfortable with just those iterations, that process of testing and learning, I think we will not only do it in this case, but we will do it as we're launching brands, as we're building new teams, as we're finding new systems. And again, those skills will help us to continue to innovate and push our brands forward.
I've seen so many teams who have started with a question they did not know how to answer. And through the series of iterations, just building on what they were doing and what others were doing, they came up with an answer that they could not have predicted at the beginning.
That's great. I mean, those are great stories to me, because again, it has that humility built in of, we don't know what the answer is going to be, right? But we're willing to find a way. We're willing to test. We're willing to have some trial and error. And you know what? If you, Simon, or you, Helen, have a roadblock, we're going to figure out a way through it together. And again, those are the things right now that I'm really encouraged, seeing industries that are sales focused. I mean, we talked about this last time, the sales process has never looked like this before. It's just a completely different world. I've seen manufacturing, companies that are, again, finding new pathways. They don't have as many people in the plants. They don't have people together like they normally do. So the innovation cycle looks extremely different. So again, I think those are very positive aspects of what we're learning right now as, business folks and as humans. And I think those will continue to carry us forward in the future.
Have you got any examples? Because I know this is partly what inspires people when they see what others are capable of and what other teams are doing. It really inspires them to get their teeth into their own challenges.
Well, I did, prepare a couple of great examples for you today. I think perhaps I'll share one of the current landscape, and then I'll go backwards and share with you a couple of previous examples that, again, I think embody the same principles. The one that is today is, I really have tried to find good news, like a lot of us, right? We want to give our families, give our kids, give our teammates the opportunity to see the good that's happening and not just the sadness. And certainly I don't want to, not tell the story, because it is a very, tragic situation for very many folks out there. But I think that we have to continue to raise our spirits. So anyway, my point is, I found the little YouTube channel from John Krasinski from The Office and from Jack Ryan. And the reason that I think this is an important example is because he was willing to put himself out there. He has this natural state of being willing to have his vulnerability showcased for the world, right? And he's been able to bring a pretty good following throughout the world, not only bringing positivity, not only showing the human side of what's going on right now, but his industry is at a grinding halt. Yet he found a way, like many of us, to operate from our living rooms and to operate in a true nature, bringing together people that are famous and people that are not famous. And anyway, I think it's a really lovely example. And I think that many are hopefully, emulating this type of behavior. Again, there's a lot of performers, there's a lot of entertainers, but in our world, we work, we have workshops throughout the world. I am, again, at a grinding halt. So it is inspirational to me how he's done this and been able to really bring people together. But if it's okay, I'll share my other examples. And
absolutely.
Let me pull those up here. So the first story that I have for you, and I recognize that neither of you live in the United States, but I think that this is a fairly common occurrence throughout the world. And it starts here, my story, with a question. So I'll ask you, what types of businesses give the worst customer service? What do you think?
In my experience, telephone operators, as in people who provide broadband services and telephones and media broadband lines and things like that.
Great.
I probably shouldn't say this now because we're all depending on them, but quite often it's deliveries. It's those larger companies that you're relying on to get things delivered quickly.
That's okay, Helen. No judgment. We've had experiences, and it's a bit of a venting session, but what I'm going to do is share with you what the top 3 worst customer service providers are. So the first one, number 3 on the list, you guessed it, Simon, it's the cable companies. Here in the United States, it's so frustrating. You're really only a number to them. It's hard to get a real person on the phone, and they just act like they don't really want to take the time to walk you through what's a problem, right? You're calling them because you usually have an issue. Number 2 on the list are the budget airlines. These guys have snarky and rude service. They have uncomfortable seats. They nickel and dime you. It's a pretty painful experience. But here in the United States, and you guys can tell me if this is true where you're from, the number 1 on the list is the DMV. So this is called the Department of Motor Vehicles. It's a government establishment where you go and you get your passport, you get your tabs renewed for your vehicle, all sorts of very important tasks. And when we have to go to the DMV, it's a soul-crushing experience. Long lines, oftentimes you wait for hours just to get inside the door. When you get inside, it's usually not air conditioned or heated properly, horrible fluorescent lighting. It's usually kind of stinky in these places. But the worst part of this experience is that it's filled with people who do not want to be there. They're impatient, they're hungry, they're uncomfortable, they're annoyed. And those are just the people in the waiting room with you. The people that are behind the bulletproof glass, they hate their jobs. They are not interested in helping you what's probably, again, a pretty important task. So after waiting in this waiting room for hours upon end, being treated honestly like a prisoner, hopefully you finally leave and you've gotten your task accomplished. The point is this: it's a torturous, dreaded experience. And that's all taken for granted unless you happen to be in a little town called Holly Springs. So in Holly Springs, which is a suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, you may walk into this DMV and then walk back out, look up at the sign and think, am I really in the right place? Am I really at the DMV? Because here is what this DMV looks like. They've got comfortable seats. They've got an atmosphere that's bright and airy, no bulletproof glass here. And everything is different. You check in on an iPad, which alerts you when it's your turn. They've got area rugs. I don't know if you can see it, but they even have freshly cut flowers on the tables. They even serve freshly baked cupcakes and fresh squeezed juices. They have a play area for kids. I mean, it's pretty noteworthy. Again, it's still a DMV, but it's atypical, and it's all because of the owner, Chad Price. He believed that if he could inject creativity into this, if he could change the way that a DMV was run, if he could challenge the assumptions, he could create a loyalty. Now, interestingly enough, people drive over 100 miles to get to Chad's DMV. 100 miles, you guys. What type of service would you drive 100 miles for? And the way people describe this, it's the same round trip timing. Maybe you spend a little bit more time in the car, right? But when you get there, you're treated with respect. It's clean. The people are friendly. Now, if Chad can do that with a DMV, remember that was the lowest on the low of that list of terrible service providers. If he can do this with a DMV, think of what we can do in our businesses with the resources at our disposal, with the people on our teams, with technology. I mean, all it takes is a reframing to inject creativity, to challenge the way things are done. And then, hopefully, like Chad, you invoke smiles instead of torture frowns. So that's my first story for you. Sorry, Simon.
I was going to ask how far people drove, because I was just sitting here thinking, I'll bet they come from miles around. I'll bet they tell all their friends about this. I bet Chad has to do zero marketing.
All referral based. And actually, a lot of the people that we've spoken to, they send their young drivers. You can imagine you've got a 16, 17, 18-year-old child. You would send them to Chad's DMV just simply because they're going to be treated with respect. They're going to be helped through the process. I mean, again, it's those small little things, but he's done a pretty incredible business. In fact, the state reimburses the DMV owners per transaction. So I think you'll appreciate, because he's built up such a loyal following and he does over double the throughput of any other DMV in the state, he's made a big business for himself.
I think this is
applying imagination to an opportunity, isn't it? He's just that's all that is, a bit of imagination. Like, what would I like to see? What would make me feel better?
That's right.
Created that space, and it's incredible. Actually, I'd like to go there.
Yeah.
I love this example because lots of people, if you say innovation to them, they think they've got to create the next iPhone or something. No, you can just take what you've got and make it really, really good.
That's right. That's right. And again, I mean, I love this example because it just starts out with such a human touch, with the comforts that people aren't used to, right? That's noteworthy in a DMV. He wanted to create the atmosphere of a spa. And it's just simple little things, but it's, again, made a pretty big difference. So my second story for you, again, going back in time, this is the story of the CEO of Random House Publishing. In the 1960s, he made a bet with a young children's author that the author could not write a book using 50 words or less. Now, the man lost that bet, and as you can imagine, a legend was born. So this story is impressive to me because can you imagine having someone come to you and say, you're going to do your job with a fraction of the tools at your disposal? I mean, this would have constrained a lot of people, but to Dr. Seuss, this constraint actually liberated his possibilities. They changed the process, and it really enabled him. I mean, they've sold over 200 million copies. This book launched Dr. Seuss to becoming one of the most important children's authors in history. So we have to think, I mean, the application of today, we are doing our jobs, if not more, with less. We have less tools. We have less opportunity to connect. But it can be the launch pad, the springboard of amazing possibilities if we allow ourselves to have that positivity, if we are allowed to leverage the types of creative problem-solving tools that are at our disposal.
That's fantastic. I had no idea that's how Dr. Seuss's kind of genre of book was born. It also sort of highlights the point that often innovation's created through a challenge by somebody just asking the question. And then our brains, I think, are really great at getting hold of that question and problem solving it if we've got a really great question to work with or a challenge, a problem to solve.
That's exactly right. I am not a musician, but I am told that oftentimes when you're learning the guitar, the teacher, the master, will actually eliminate strings from the student. So you might go from 4 strings to 3 strings to even 2 strings. And the intention here at a certain level is that the student needs to become creative using less strings. You'd think that the possibilities are limited when rather if the student is able to improvise, to use the skills that they have, they can actually become a better master at the end of the day by constraining themselves and using less strings. So again, there's lots of different examples in the world, but we have to be, again, positive, have a good optimistic perspective in order to allow our minds to wander and think and grow.
And I think, Sarah, like, how do you innovate when the world is being reshaped and we don't really know what it looks like? So everyone keeps telling us everything will be different, and Simon and I keep talking about this over and over again, and we're not really sure what will be different, except that we'll have learned how to do more with less, as you say. But how do you innovate for a situation that you don't know what it's going to be like?
That's right. Yeah, I think there's a healthy balance between kind of the defense and offense philosophies, right? I mean, we have to defend ourselves now. We have to make sure that we're protecting our businesses, our teams, and that we're living in the moment. And I think that balanced with that, futuristic viewpoint of being open to the possibilities that things will continue to shift and change. And we just have to be open to that. We have to be ready. Our mindsets are, I think naturally able to think through change. So I do believe, it is going to be a challenge for us because we don't know what tomorrow will bring, but, I think that can also bring just as much possibility as it can restriction.
Yeah. I'm really keen to just understand, and lots of clients have been asking me, how do you create the conditions for creativity, the environment for it? Because a lot of them are looking at their competitors or looking at other people in their markets or talking to friends about really innovative, creative groups of people and looking at their own teams, asking, how do you do that then? How do you get people to be able to do that and just kind of spark up and have ideas and spark up conversations because they don't see it going on in their own organization?
That's a great question, and one that we battle all the time, Simon. There are organizations and leaders who know that innovation is critical to the success of their organization, right? I mean, the amount of disruption in the world is unprecedented. It was before COVID, and it certainly is even more so afterwards. But they don't understand how to build that type of a culture. They don't know how to build the roadblocks and the foundation to allow and empower their teams to think. And, we feel that creativity is probably the most important tool that individuals, teams, organizations utilize now and in the future. So that is actually what Platypus Labs does. We actually will come in and help an organization. We do a lot of first diagnostics to understand where cultures are at, what do they need to fix. The second piece is really building, again, that type of culture. And I would say you have to have rewards, you have to have rituals that really encourage that behavior. If a person fears for their job by saying, gosh, if they say something like, well, we can't bring up that idea, that's been tried in the past, the organization will never go for that, I could be fired for coming up with a new way, right? Like those types of behaviors we have to reset. We have to build a structure top to bottom that will really start to encourage that type of, again, fail forward philosophy. So culture is a big component. And then we also believe that creativity is a muscle. It's the exact same type of muscle. If you were an athlete, you would practice, right? You would lift weights, you would run, you would do the things necessary to get your body ready when you're in a game, when you're in a competitive situation. If you're a musician, you don't just take the stage after one lesson. You have to practice. You have to practice. And the reason is that when you are trying to be creative, you have to have built up those skills along the path so that when you need to call upon those skills, when you're asked to perform in a brainstorm, when you're asked to be a creative expert and to come up with new ideas, you have to have put the time in to build those skills along the way. So again, another of the tools that we give folks are the way to practice, tools and techniques that are proven ways to unleash creativity. And
actually, I think I read, Sarah, that creativity is the third most important job skill now in the World Economic Forum, which that would not have even been mentioned before. So it just shows you that actually the bigger corporations are really looking for that. And I think that's incredible, isn't it? That is something that has now moved up the list.
Yes, that's right, Helen. And actually, number one and number two, in my opinion, are just derivatives of creativity. I mean, it's the same type of thought process of how to become, inventive thinkers.
Fantastic. So, and I know that there are some things that people can tap into if they want to learn a bit more about this. What have you got that people can tap into?
So we actually offer a number of different online learning tools. And I would say, again, we've had to shift. We normally bring organizations together. We normally do in-person workshops, but we're doing a lot of online virtual setting workshops right now, which, I believe can be just as effective. So that's one tool. We also allow, kind of a stream of creative stories and tools that people can practice. And if they go to platypuslabs.com, they can find some of these resources. But, for individuals who, may not have the capital or, even though it's a small investment, I would say there are tools out there. I mean, just having that heads up time to look out in the world, reading things, watching different videos, listening to podcasts. I mean, the opportunity, the serendipitous opportunity that you put yourselves in when you're looking out in the world is that you'll see different things, you'll hear different mindsets, and you'll be able to apply that back to the challenges that you're faced with. So people can do this any day. It's just having the diligence to put it into your schedule to make sure you're practicing.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I think every day should be fueled with new ideas. And I know since we spoke last, I have certainly completed 2 of the courses online with Sarah, and I am looking at hacking innovation now, which is very interesting. I will not be a hacker at the end of it, but hopefully I'll have creativity and how to in marketing. But yeah, so thank you, Sarah. I've really enjoyed them, and I think you're absolutely correct. Huge.
Wonderful. Sarah, thank you very, very much. Hopefully everybody's been suitably inspired to take on their challenges and find real innovative solutions. So thank you very, very much indeed. Helen, thank you. Sarah, thank you. Thank you for watching. Sure. And we look forward to seeing you again on another episode of Pep Talks. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.